So, welcome everybody to another one in our webinar series. This one is everything you need to know about making great plots in PLS Toolbox and Solo. And this will be presented by our Manny Palacios. And say hi, Manny.
Hello, everybody.
Okay. And I'm going to be act as our MC today, but we have several of the Eigen guys hanging out. You can see them. They mostly have Evri in front of their name. I see our Donald O'Sullivan is here, our Lyle Lawrence, our Neil Gallagher, our Scott Koch. I see all those guys here. And so feel free to ask questions in the chat, please. So we use the chat window to ask questions, and we'll monitor that chat and pass those questions on to Manny, or we'll answer them ourselves within the chat. And I think that's most of what I need to say. And am I missing anything, anybody? Okay, I don't think so. So why don't you take it away, Manny?
Thank you, Barry. So, hello, everybody. I'm greetings from New York, upstate. Today, we are going to be talking about everything that you need to know for making some great plots in the PLS Toolbox and Solo. So, a quick outline here. So, first, we're going to address what is plot controls. That is our main plot, our main GUI for plotting. And we are going to focus on a couple of data sets. One will be the archaeology data set. I'm going to show you how to access that. It's part of the demo data sets in the PLS Toolbox and Solo. We are going to go and see how we can change the overall look of the plot, labels and classes, how to make a 3D plot. And then we're going to switch gears to a spectral data set, and that it will be near IR, and it's going to be we call it Octane by near IR data set, and we are going to show how color by works in there. So the first things first. So what's plot controls? So plot controls is basically the hub of all things plot and everything that involves data visualization in Solo and the PLS Toolbox. Every time that you try to make a plot in the PLS Toolbox or Solo, you will see this window popping up. And with that, I'm just gonna switch back to MATLAB. I say switch back because I usually leave in that window, in that MATLAB window. Let me just say and show it here and switch to MATLAB. So I already opened my browser, my PLS workspace browser. This is what you will see when you open Solo. So the first data set that we need to load is Arch, and you see it's here, the third one down in the demo data set. So you will probably see your model cache window on the bottom right. Just open that, and you can double click or just drag and drop it in the workspace. I'm going to double click it there. So there are two ways that you could start plotting data. So once you have a dataset object in your workspace, you can either open the dataset objects or DSO and plot from there. If I double click on Arch, the dataset object window will open, and I can just click here on plot, and that will plot the data. Or from the workspace, I can right click and say plot. That's what I'm going to do right now. So as I mentioned before, as soon as you open a plot controls the plot controls window will open, and it will always display the data summary. So what is the data summary? The data summary is the mean of all the rows in your data plotted against the variables. So here we know that we have 10 variables. Those are 10 different concentrations of metals. And we have, I think we can see here in the workspace, 75 samples. So that is the mean of the 75 samples. So the variables are number by the position that they are in the data set. But if we go here on the top of the graph, we can see that there is this button that says ABC that turns on labels. And because I have the labels of the variables pre-populated in my data set object, I can just click on them and that will show them in the windows. So what is the data summary in plot controls? So first, we will always see the mean of the data, but we can also see the whole data. Just by clicking on data here, it will show exactly what the content of all those metals for each of the samples that we have there. We can see the data, we can see the mean, we can see the standard deviation, and the mean plus standard deviation that sometimes is very useful. We can also see minimum, maximum, and if you have some missing data some missing data points in your data set, you can also see that. So the other thing that I want to show you, I'm going to change here back to mean, is that here at the bottom of plot controls, we can change the plot type. There are some smart code written behind this that it selects automatically the kind of plot that it makes for you. So usually if you have, for example, spectral data, it will immediately plot like a line. But in this case, because it's individual data points, it's not a continuous axis, it is plotting individual variables. But we can, just click there and we could, for example, plot these as bars. And that's what we are going to see here. Or we can plot just as, let's say, lines. So one of the first things that I would like to do whenever I open a graph is to make sure, that I can see the axis, that I can properly see the data display. So to change the axis in any plot in the plot GUI, in plot controls, all you have to do is right-click anywhere in the figure that is not the data. If you right-click in the data, you will have other options. But if you right-click on the axis or even in the middle of the plot, you will always get there at just axis. Just click on that, and it will show you the axis properties window. In here, you can basically, adjust anything that is available to you for the actual figure. So you can show what are you displaying from the axis, from the y-axis, the x-axis. You can add grids to your plot. You can also add a title if you want to, and you can change those fonts individually. Most of the time, we want to apply the same font for the whole graph. So I love that we have here this little check mark that you can check in there and say all fonts. So if I change, for example, this let's say 14, it's going to make it look very big. But now you can see there that it's way more clear. So I'm going to say, OK. The next thing that I would like to change is the thickness of this line. And you see that as soon as I click on that data, it shows me a little label that says what the data is. And because, for example, if I will have data showing in there, if I click on one of those, it will always highlight basically the row of data or the sample, and it will show me what sample it is. So it shows me the number in the dataset object, and it shows me the label associated with that sample. So that happens, and sometimes it's very common that we highlight and then we don't know how to get rid of the highlighted data. So the way to do it is just you click again on the highlighted data and it will just disappear. So now how do we change the size of this? Just like before, right click on the data. This time we are doing it on the data, and there is the option that says line width, and I'm going to change that to 3. Right now it's at 0.5, so I know that 3 should be enough. And now I can, if I change to data, it remembers those settings. So it doesn't matter if you change here what you're looking at. If I change to the standard deviation, the mean and standard deviation, it will still remember the settings that I just changed. All right, so as I mentioned at the beginning, when you open plot controls, the first thing that plot controls will show you is the data summary. If you go in plot controls to the menu that says plot, you can change what data you are showing. So instead of the summary, I could select rows, for example. And that will allow me to select individual samples to plot. So for example, this is the very first sample, this is the second sample. And if you have groups of samples that you would like, let's say that I want to plot from 4 to 8. So I can just click the first one and then holding shift, I just click on 8 and it will select all the data points that are there. Furthermore, if I click on command or controlling on Windows, I can add to that previous selection. You see that I am adding just different data points. So you have a lot of flexibility on what data you want to show. So now in this case, we are plotting the rows. So that those are the samples, but we can also plot the individual variables. And when you change to that, so see that at this right now I'm showing all those labels. Of course, when I change to columns, it will keep showing the labels because I had them on. So for now, I'm going to turn them off. And what we are seeing here is the content, content of one of those variables, in this case is iron, against the samples. And what we are seeing here is the first sample in your data set, and the last sample on your data set is on the right. So it's basically ordered by the row. But you can do a lot of things in here. You can, for example, if you would like to, you can plot against zirconium. So we can do a scatter plot. But before I do that, I'm going to change my plot type to scatter, because I mean now it will be a scatter plot. It doesn't make much sense to plot that as a line. So I'm going to change that to zirconium. And now I get a scatter plot of iron versus zirconium. One thing that I would like to do here right away is change the size of those data points because they are way too small. So I'm going to go there again, right click, and then symbol size, and I'm going to make that 12. And hopefully you saw how those data points got way bigger. So now one thing that is very common when we are doing exploratory analysis and when we're doing classification, attempting to do classification, apply classification algorithms in data sets, is that we want to add class labels, if you might, to the data. Fortunately, for example, if this data set already has classes assigned to them, and to access those classes, we are going to press this button right here. So I'm going to go ahead and press that. And what you see there is that we have 5 classes. I'm going to go ahead and press here in the legend button to make that legend appear. There you go. And one cool thing is that you can move things around. So I can replace that legend whatever I want. So we have 4 classes and we have a class 0. And that class 0 means that it is not assigned. Those samples are not assigned specifically to any class just yet. This is common for us, for example, when we have test samples that are unknown to us. So you can still perform your exploratory analysis with those samples, but they are not assigned to anything. And for example, if we do a classification, we try to do some sort of, discriminant analysis or classification or use a classification algorithm, the algorithm is going to ignore them. So the PLS toolbox ignores those class 0 samples for any kind of modeling, which is pretty cool. It is convenient. So we have one thing that also happens often. You don't see it in this data set because this data set is it's not as populated, but sometimes when you have thousands of samples, it gets hard to see where is what, and you will have classes that are behind others. So one thing that you can do is just go for one member of that class, and that will bring that class to the front. And you can see that immediately it highlights it, and it shows you a label. And as you can see, that's another thing that you can always do. You can always move the labels around, which is super, super convenient. Again, you can just select any class you want. And if by chance, sometimes it will happen that you don't want that highlight on that, just click again on the sample, and you can just toggle again. You can do it as many times as you want, but just remember that to get rid of that label and highlighting, you just have to click again on the sample. All right. So another thing that we can do, for example, is select classes, and that is a useful tool. So if I highlight that and I then right click on the class, I can say select class. And I can see here in the legend that there is a new object that says BL selected, right? Because we just selected the class. You won't see the change here until you click again on the class. If you had another plot that is associated with this plot, then you are gonna see that. But sometimes if you just have one plot, you just have to click on it because it toggles through it. So you can see now that that is the class that is selected. So I showed you before how to display labels for the samples in the graph. But one great thing is that if you have any selection in the data and you press labels, it will show the labels just for that data that is selected. And with labels, you have a lot of freedom to do also some stuff. For example, if you go to plot controls, you say view, and then you say label angle. And I think that if I add there a 45-degree in the upper part of the point, I will probably be able to see better some of those labels. You just remember that you can move them around. Sometimes it gets a little cluttered, so you just have to keep that in mind. So one thing that I don't know if you noticed that when we change the angle, a couple of labels disappear, and that is because here we have some group of samples, and there is a way to actually manage that. And again, we just go to view and we'll go to the clutter labels, and we can select basically the level that we want to declare those labels. So right now it's at light, but if I select, for example, let's say maximum, so to see some of them disappear. So you can see now that it's trying to show you the labels where there is no, any case that you're going to basically have any confusion on some of those labels. Again, if I having right now, I'm going to go again to light, so I recover some of those labels. Anytime that you're going to do a selection, because you already turned those labels on, it's going to basically show you the labels. So for example, if I change to this class, again, right click, select class, you see that immediately shows me the labels, and it will display exactly what you last did. So it's showing the 45-degree angles going to the top at the level of the cluttering that we selected that is light. That's why we still have some degree of overlap. But now let's pedal back. One thing that I'm going to do, and you have to keep that in mind when you have a lot of data. If you keep your labels on, and then you do something like, for example, I'm going to go now and toggle to showing no classes. So I press there. Right now, because I have the selection, it is still keeping only those labels. But if I go here to edit and say deselect all, what the toolbox is going to do is it's going to show you all the labels of all the data. When you have a small data set like this one, it's not a problem. But when you have thousands of samples, you're going to be there waiting for a little bit for the toolbox to draw all those labels. So just keep that in mind and make sure that you turn off your labels whenever you are going to deselect or something like that. So I guess a lot of you might be wondering, well, I mean, usually the data doesn't come with classes, right? We have to add classes. So there are a few ways to add those classes. One way will be in the dataset object. We go to raw labels, in this case, because we want to add classes to the samples. We can also do it to the variables, but in this case, we want to add labels to the samples. And here is the first class set that we were seeing before. So if you have a list of your samples in Excel, you can basically copy and paste here. You will just make a new set and then copy in Excel and paste here. So, oops, I'm sorry. One of my windows moved. The other way to do is graphically, and it's very convenient. So to do that graphically, all you have to do is select the data. We haven't talked about selecting the data with the tool. So here at the bottom of plot control, we have the select button that is actually also here at the top of the figure, if you can see that. So the cool thing is that we can just open tool, and there are many ways that we can select data. And this is really, really, really convenient. In this case, what I'm going to do, instead of using box, I am going to go with lasso because that gives me more flexibility when I am doing my selection. So if your data has no classes, what you will do is press select and then go here and select, for example, I see there clearly 3 clusters, right? So I am going to select this cluster and I'm going to right click and say set class. So because this data already has a class set, that's the first option that we are going to get. But we know that we want to add our own class set. So in your case, you will have no classes here and you will just say new class. But right now, because I want to add another class set, I'm going to say new class set. And I am going to call this iron zirconium clusters. And this first cluster, I'm going to just call, let's say 1. All right, so I just made all these thing one cluster. So, but right now it's not showing that. And in order to find your new class set, you have to go here. And now it's not going to toggle, but it's going to show you the list of the class sets that you have in there. So this is the one that I just made. And you can see that now this one, the blue one, is class 1. Now it does inherit the classes of the previous class set when you do it graphically. If you will do this on Excel and just copy and paste, you wouldn't see this problem. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make my other 2 classes for these 2 main clusters. So I'm going to go again. I already selected lasso, so I know it's lasso, and I'm going to go and select this guy here. I am going to say set class. I'm going to say new class. Now this is I'm going to call it 2. And for this one, because I want all of that, I am not going to use the tool. I'm just going to say right click, select class. It's going to select all that. And now I'm going to say set class. Say new class. And I'm going to call that 3. All right. So here now we have our 3 classes. And one thing that I would like to do right away is that I don't like these stars in here. So I want to change that. Sometimes I'd rather just to have fill circles. So if you, in any of those class sets, if you want to just change all of them to circles, you can just go here to change symbol and you can say fill circles. So it will keep the size that you had before. It's just going to change all of them to circles. But let's say that I don't want this color, or I want to change this particular class to be able to show it slightly bigger. So we can still do that. We right click in there and we say custom. That opens the set symbol style. And just here. And you see that it's already selecting my class 5. And well, I mean, the class 5 name is 3. So don't get confused by that. This is just the order that the class are presented to the DSO. So the important thing is that you can see that it matches the color of what you're trying to do. So let's say that what I want is to add an edge to that. So I can just press on edge. I'm going to add a black edge. And then I can just, okay, you can do whatever really you want. You can, if you want to change the color, let's change it to this green. And yeah, we can do that. And that will change the way that particular class looks. So another tool that is kind of useful when you're doing, again, exploratory analysis and trying to see how the data naturally cluster and if your clusters are making sense is confidence ellipses. But we have a few different flavors of see how we can connect those classes. So the first one is point in sequence, and that is this button right next to the classes. You see that it has like 2 confidence ellipses in there. So the first one is point in sequence, and that basically connects the samples with a line following the order that they are in the dataset object. We can also do border points that connects the points that are in the outer sphere of that of your cluster. And then we also have confidence ellipses that you probably have seen used many times in publications. One cool thing is that we can actually tune not tune, just set, change the confidence limit for those ellipses. So right now it's at 95. That's the default value, but we can change them to 99. You see how they become a little bit larger. And the way that we draw these confidence ellipses is basically using the T-Hotelin square. And what you can see here is that, for example, this class has a larger confidence ellipse, and that is because it has less samples than the others. So in order to cover that 99%, the ellipse has to be bigger due to the lower number of members in that class. So now I'm going to show you, let's say that, oh, the last one, actually, that's one of my favorites, is Spider. And what Spider does is that it draws a line from each of the points to the mean of the class. So that kind of shows you how the cluster gravitates around that mean of each of these classes. So now let's say that you are happy with this and you want to export it either for Word or PowerPoint, whatever it is that you are trying to show this. One thing that you can do is simply copy and paste. And to copy and paste, you just go here to edit, copy figure, and then you can paste that into PowerPoint. And I have here PowerPoint. I think I had like a little, there you go. So if you do this, I am on a Mac. If you do this on Windows, you're going to have a little bit more liberty editing that figure. In Mac, it just pastes a high resolution version of the figure. The other thing that you can do, if you really need a high resolution for publication, will be to go here on File, and you can save that as a high resolution figure. So you say Save As, and here you have a bunch of options. Whatever you need. I mean, you have TIFF files, but you also have vector based type of files, like SVG, and also the where is the other one?
I don't know what you're looking for, Manny.
EPS. There
Yeah,
you go, EPS.
right at the top.
Yeah. So you can
Yeah,
just save that. And
EPS is my personal favorite since I work on a Mac, because then I can do any final tweaking I need to do. I use Adobe Illustrator is one example there, but EPS is great because it's line art, and so it's infinite resolution.
Yeah. And you can also open it natively in preview. You don't need to only have like Illustrator or anything advanced. Even the preview on Mac will open that file, which is pretty convenient. All right, so the last thing there are a couple of more things I wanted to show you with this, and that is that sometimes you want to have a more descriptive interpretation of what the clustering is doing. And a way to do that, and I love this tool, I have used it a lot, is that if you right click on any of the data, you see here at the bottom, you can display the histogram for that data against, depends, you can use the X axis data or the Y axis data. So if I press there X, you will see that it's basically a projection of those points into that X axis. So we have a few things that you can do here. You can, change how the transparency, if you want to make it a little bit more transparent, a little bit more opaque. You can also display the standard deviation. Just, if you want to see if those if those clusters are overlapping or not. If you make any change here, for example, if you delete some points or mask some points, then you can just update the histogram by pressing the update button. And you can also bin that histogram in different ways. So if you keep pressing your plus, it will go up. If you press your minus, it will go down in the way that you are binning. When you use one of our discriminant analysis algorithms available in the PLS toolbox, a lot of times what you're going to get is a probability, for example, against samples. So what will happen is a lot of the stuff that you want to plot, the histogram that you want to plot, is actually in the y-axis. So you're going to get something that looks like this. And if you just and this is exactly like the one we saw on X. It's just flipped. But if you want to display it in the other way, you can just press this button right here at the top, and it will flip the axis, which is also cool. All right. So the last thing that I wanted to show you with Arch is that, let's say that you have another principal component, or perhaps you just want to see how another of these element projects. So to just add a third dimension, you just go here in plot control, it says C, and I'm going to add variant because I know that it still keeps my nice clusters. And you can see that it basically keeps also, it shows you the spider also in 3D, the spider connection in the clusters for each of the classes. And if I change to the confidence ellipse, it will show you those confidence ellipses in 3 dimensions. So most of the things that I show you for the 2D cases are true for this. You can do selections here. You can change the size of the classes and so on and so forth. So I don't know if we have any questions in the chat.
No, none so far. We're doing good, I think.
All right. So moving on, I mentioned that I was going to show you also a spectral data set. So for that, I am going to go scroll down in that demo data folder, and you can see here octane rating by near IR. So I'm going to double click on that. That will load an octane level. This is data that we usually use to demonstrate regression. So we have a Y associated with this, that is the octane grade of a bunch of different gasolines. And we have the spectral here. So what I want to plot right now is the spectral. So as I showed you before, right click, plot. So, and just like before, plot controls will show you the data summary. So what we are seeing here is the average spectra for all the data that we have, for all the spectra that we have in there. So I'm gonna go here very quickly. So just to recap how we do that, I'm gonna go adjust my axis, right click on the axis or anywhere else in the plot, not in the data. I'm gonna say apply to all fonts. I'm gonna change this to 14. I think this is what we changed it before. So now I can see those, and I'm gonna do the same thing with the line. I'm gonna right click on the line width and change that to 3. And you know, I can see, I can plot the whole data. And you see how automatically plot controls decided that, you know, this is continuous data. We have an axis and I'm gonna display it as a line. So the spectra will always look at spectra unless something in the data set informs plot controls otherwise. So one thing that I know now is I can, if I have classes in the dataset object, I can look at them just by pressing the class. And yes, we do have 2 classes there. But I mean, sometimes, you know, for classification problems, we usually want to see the class. But for regression problems, there is another way to convey, you know, that in this kind of 2D representation, and that is by using color by. So what color by is going to do is it's going to take values from a vector that is the same size of the samples that you have. In this case, because this is a regression problem, we have that octane grade. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically color by these spectra by their octane grade. So I press here in color by, say load. If you had a white block in there, it will also show the block in there. But right now, we don't have a white block loading in the analysis window because we don't have an analysis window open. But here is our variable that we want to display. That is the octane. And you see this exactly the same size as your spectral data set that we are displaying. And boom, you see right there that is found in the color. So it is kind of hard to see because in this band around 1400, things are a little bit messy. But if I zoom in into this section of the spectra, you can see how color by is actually super useful. We can see how the octane grade changes. And if we want to know by how much, here we have the bar, the color bar. That is your legend to understand how that color by is coloring the spectra. So you can see that here at the bottom, we have high octane grade gasoline, and at the top, we have lower octane grade. One thing that you can do is that you can change that. Sometimes this color pattern doesn't work great for everything. So one thing that you can do is just, again, right click on your bar. I don't know why right now it doesn't want to right click. Maybe I just need to zoom out. I don't know if it's because maybe I have these numbers
No, it's
too
because you
big.
still have zoom on, I think.
I
If
just
you turn
zoom.
the,
Oh,
no,
that's right. That's
yeah,
right. Yeah, yeah. So
there you go.
it, yeah. So it is not. Yeah, it is not nuanced. Sometimes you have to be careful because depending on what, if you have any of these tools active, the graph is going to respond differently. So that was a great thing that happened to me. So it doesn't happen to you guys. So I turn off now the zoom tool and right click here so I can change the 2 different kind of, you know, the color map. So let's say that I want to show jet. So the way, so you see that it updates the bar right away, but not the graph. So for doing that, you just have to press here in plot controls, plot again, and there you have it. So I'm gonna now go ahead and zoom again here. And you can see how that transitions from one to the other very nicely. One last tool that I wanted to show you is and I'm going to change this back to
Hey, Manny.
Again, yes.
I did have a request here for just in the plot showing the mean plus standard deviation.
Yes.
And so you can show that. Not my favorite color scheme for that. But
Yeah, this is
yeah,
not
if you
working
got
great
rid of
for
the
this.
color bar, you'd get the usual colors, I think.
Yeah, so to get rid of color by, all you have to do is press on color, say none, and then there you have the standard um,
Yeah.
the way that the standard colors that we have for that. One thing that I guess I don't think I mentioned before is that if we have a class, and when you display all the data, it will display all the data. But if I go to mean, it will display the mean for each of the classes. And that is also a neat thing, because sometimes you have several classes and you want to see what are the actual differences between them. And the mean of the whole data doesn't help you much. But if you have class sets, then you can use that to display the data, which is convenient. Since we are there, I'm going to hide the color bar and I'm just going to show these guys. So one last thing that I wanted to show you was how to use auto Y scale. And this is something that is useful when you are, trying to see how, if there are different kind of preprocessings that you could apply, mostly if normalization will help you. If you just simply want to normalize the data. So one thing that you can do is just go to plot controls, view, and then you go here to auto Y scale. And this is really cool. You just select, for example, you have different kind of norms. Just so we have norm 1 that normalizes to the area, norm 2 that normalizes to the length of the vector of the whole spectrum, or 1 that normalizes to the max, makes the maximum of the plot 1. So let's say that we do that, and you see how this is the maximum of the plot. So now that becomes 1, and you see how that changes. I'm gonna color by this again, because with the octane gray looks also cool, and you can see more the effect of what the normalization is doing. One thing that is useful, I'm gonna hide this legend because it makes it complicated, and I'm gonna show the color bar again. So one thing that is cool is that, let's say that you want to see what happens, and instead of making this the max, because that's the max in the whole spectra, you want to see what happens if you normalize against 1 here. I'm making that peak 1, sorry. So all you have to do is you zoom in that area, and then you go view and you say auto scale. So it's still set to 1, max to 1, but now you say scale to from current zoom. So now it's going to make that 1. And if you double click on the graph, that's how you go to the full view. So now we are normalized here, and you can see what happens in the rest of the day. And you can get creative, if you want, you can zoom in this area. Let's say zoom in here, and we can say again, view, auto Y scale, and some data, boom. And well, now you can see even a bigger effect in what's going on in this area with the octane level. So those are some of the tools that are available, and sometimes we don't know that they're there, but they are super useful when you're doing stuff like trying to find out if your preprocessing is doing what you need. When you're doing any kind of regression, what you want to see are, where you're looking is for areas where you see a smooth change in your color by map. That's basically what I had for today. I don't know if the Angen guys want to show another examples or.
Well, I do have a question to address. And that is, Michael asked, how can you create and save, say, axis scale color schemes and save them for reuse? And I'm not sure if I understand the question exactly. I'm sort of interpreting that question as saying, can you create custom color maps? You could certainly do that, applying them is something that you could do in PLS Toolbox under MATLAB, but we don't have a tool to add them to Solo. And
Right.
and so I have done actually quite a bit of creating my own color maps for things, but I wind up having to apply them from the command line. And
Yeah.
they don't register, they don't wind up in the list of things when you click on the color bar.
Right. Yeah, and that's a great point. That, you know, I mean, all of the things that I show you today, they work in Solo and the PLS toolbox, no problem. But when you have the PLS toolbox, you have way more flexibility and possibilities using the MATLAB command line. And there is a bunch of things that you can do, like because you can add, for example, set up, if you have already, you know, it takes just like 3 lines of code to set up all the sizes for the axis and the sizes for the line and all that stuff. So you could, in theory, have, you know, a little piece of code that will standardize the look of your figures, if that's what you're looking for.
And that's something that I've done in the past is created that so it always then automatically sets those same fonts and the same size and then in that bit. Here's a good question, and I think we can answer this one. How can I modify the number ticking on x-axis, like make the spacing at 100 nanometers instead of 50? And that actually shows up in something that one of the windows that Manny already showed when you go to edit the axis.
Yeah. So I do not recall where.
That was in here somewhere. Um, about y-axis.
Yeah,
Oh, I
no,
could swear I saw that one earlier today. About show xticks labels.
oh, these ones, the actual labels. I'm not
You
sure. I don't know
know,
if
what I
maybe
saw that in
Scott
one
can
of the
help us with
windows that
that.
you had up earlier.
Yeah, me too.
Um, yeah,
It doesn't come to me right now. Oh.
there's just okay.
So there are
Yeah,
things
that's
that of course you can do. You can just resize, and Plot GUI will try to display that the labels not cluttered. But I mean, this is not ideal, right? What you want is to be able that at any size customize that, and I am sure there is a way. So we can
yeah,
talk
that's
about that later.
one
But
that I'm really used to doing from the command line is specifying that. And also the nice thing is then you could change all the labels on there to, you know, words if you wanted doing that. And so I use that some, but again, that's a dive a little deeper kind of thing.
yeah, and it's not available in Solo. That's the thing to keep in mind.
Right.
Um,
Okay, anything else that we have in the chat line here? Well, that's all I see for the moment. So I'm going to thank everybody for attending. We'll get this video up on the web and send out a note for you when we do. And thanks, Manny. And we hope to see you at the next one. Oh, hold it. Here's another question coming in. So, how can I recreate an ROI? I assume that's not return on investment. Or are we looking at for a
re,
receiver
re,
operator curve? Is that what we're thinking? I'm not sure
region
what
of
you.
interest. Yeah, region of
Ah,
interest.
okay.
So I am yeah. So again, the way to do that is here in the access properties, and you know, I mean, that's another of those things that we usually do it in the command line too when we are in MATLAB. But you can get that here if you just want to focus, for example, in this region. You can zoom. But I mean, if you want to consistently and show exactly the same thing, the best way is just to go here in the access properties and select the levels that you want.
And the question is it possible to add a text box near the color map and rotate it 90 degrees? And I believe the answer to that is yes, you can add text to a plot. And I don't know if you were prepared to show that one. I know our Neil Gallagher does that all the time. And Neil, do you want to tell us how you do that? And trying to
I don't think
unmute
that
Neil.
is here.
Okay. But yeah, that is is it insert text? Is that where it is? Oh, there we go, Neil.
It's under the insert toolbar up there.
Here? In the
at the top, you see the insert menu.
Yep.
And text box.
There you go.
Down the list there.
And I'm guessing I didn't see if it added something there. Let me do it again. Text box. Huh. Oh, it is there. It's just that I think it's on the.
Yeah, and you can rotate those.
Oh.
Just right click on them and
it's winning. Right now it's winning.
Yeah.
Let's see. So in theory I can resize this.
Just double click in there.
Yeah, I don't know why it doesn't want to. Oh, there you go. Text.
Yeah. And then you can right click on it and you can change its rotation, its font, and all sorts of stuff.
Oh, got it.
Okay.
Change the background color so
you can see it. Background color. And let's not make it that. Let's make it just yellow. Got it.
There you go.
So you can, so you can do whatever you can.
Right click again. I think there's a rotation property.
Fix box to text. Edit.
Maybe under property inspector. Yeah, go down to property inspector and then you can get after all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so here,
yes.
So these are the deep cuts in MATLAB. Because I mean there are a lot of options here.
Try position and see if you can find the rotation button.
There
you just dig down into there, things that.
Yeah, there you go. No, this is if I want it in the center.
That's the alignment, yeah.
Yeah. Vertical alignment. Yeah, this is the same thing, but it doesn't. So these are normalized to the. I am sure there are ways to rotate this with no.
Yeah, I just did it myself with the X label function in PLS toolbox on the command line with MATLAB. But
yeah.
Hey, Manny.
Yeah.
Yep. If we can get off the deep dive into the properties inspector, have a question that might be easy to answer.
All right.
Yeah, and that was how do you get the standard deviation to report as a number, not just graphically? And if you go back to that plot, so the nice thing there, and Manny can show this, is that anytime you have the plot controls window up, it will have, and you can easily export the data that it's plotting. So if you go to your plot controls window and go to the file menu, you can say ask
save
it
data.
to save data.
Barry, the mean and standard deviation are calculated on the fly just for the figure. They will not show up in the exported.
Oh.
But you can get that from the data set editor, from the menu. If you open the data in the data set editor and select view summary statistics.
Right.
And that'll create a data set for you with all kinds of summary statistics.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's one that I didn't know.
And it keeps your axis scale information for mode 2, or the wavelength. You could see that. Yeah, Manny's pointing
Yes.
that out. So mean,
Yeah, so
standard deviation.
Yes. So I can. This is the mean. This will be the standard deviation. So you can plot it together. It doesn't plot it around the mean like we do in plot summary, but it is there. You can also have, for example, the mean, minimum, and maximum there together. And you have all sorts of discrete statistics in there. One thing that, I mean, now that we are there, I guess we can also do that with when we have classes. When anytime that you have a selection. So let's say, just for the sake of continuity, that we have this. I'm going to show those classes. So if I select this class, and I can again right click and I can say statistics on selection, and that will do exactly the same thing that we just saw, but only on that selection that we have here. So now we have the mean for that, only that class. We have the means for each of those elements and all the statistics, all the descriptive statistics that we need. And you can also plot them and do whatever you want afterwards, just like we show.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, with that, let's call this to a close. And again, thanks to everybody, and we'll let you know when we get this posted. Thanks, Manny.
Thank you.